This week's guest is Ray Wheeler from Sales Geek. Ray has helped multiple businesses to improve their sales and scale their business. So, Ray, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Mike.
So, I thought the most obvious first question, as we've got someone with such a wealth of sales knowledge, what actually is a good salesperson?
A good salesperson. Well, there you go. Well, clearly someone who can communicate how well people can benefit from their products or services, and essentially close deals for their business. That's what everyone is reliant on upon their sales force or salespeople. So
Yeah, and so I suppose before they get to the closing stage, though, there must be something that goes into that. I know you've spoken to me before about the 4 Ps, so I wondered if you could explain what they are.
Okay. So I think the 4 Ps was something that we referred to in terms of part of the work that we do with small businesses to help them with their sales. And that was, ensuring that they've got a good sales process, that they know how to build a pipeline of sales. So that was the second P, and to have a really clear value proposition. So proposition was the third. And actually, genuinely speaking, it can often mean that they might have some issues with their people, which is the 4th P, which is where the sales training comes in on. But there are many other things outside of that, to answer your second part of the question, which is to do with, where do, salespeople go wrong, or what is it that we see where they need help, which comes under obviously the people bracket. And every salesperson is different, but a lot of them might have had some training in the past.
Sure.
But I often find they fall into the same traps, which, I'd be happy to share.
Well, let's get into that in a bit.
Yeah.
But before we go into that specifically, I wondered if there's more you could say about each of the Ps themselves. So the first one was process, wasn't it?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so it's important. We talk a lot about process. In fact, the work that we do as fractional sales directors often means that we're coming to a business and we'll look at exactly how they do things from the moment they receive an inquiry, or they might do some outbound prospecting.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're working with a good marketing person like your very good self, and they've got some inquiries coming in, then obviously I'm keen to see what their process is in order to take that particular, either marketing qualified lead or some version of a lead through the funnel into the famous sales funnel to a closed sale. And there can be 12, maybe 13 different things going on in that process. From discovery calls, meetings, proposals, handling a few objections. And, that's why sales is never easy. There's all these different things going on. And what we've tried to do at Sales Geek is to simplify that process for salespeople and also local business owners, and to put that down into kind of no more than 4 key stages. And for all the work that we do and looking at, a whole spectrum of different businesses, we find that there are normally 3 or 4 areas where it breaks down.
Okay, so what would they be?
Well, the first one would be, before we talk about anything, is just to create a great first impression. It's amazing how many different businesses don't really perfect the art of asking the right questions, or at least having a few icebreakers that can get somebody to kind of appreciate them a little bit more than they would do otherwise. And we talk about that by, when you study the brain, there are 2 things going on. You've got your prefrontal cortex and your limbic system. And this wonderful limbic system is where we store all our feelings and emotions. And they say that 80% of us, focus too much on the prefrontal cortex, talking about facts and figures, how long they've been in business, why that person should be buying them, their products and services from them. And actually, the first thing that we need to do is make that person feel comfortable. And there's a number of studies that suggest that, if you can find some common ground, or if you can pay them a compliment, or, you can congratulate them on something, just anything to make sure that, you're no longer a stranger, you're no longer a distraction, you've got their attention the right way. So the first thing and foremost is to make sure you create a good first impression.
Well, that's interesting because that's obviously, you see a lot of that kind of thing on websites. It's features and what you'll get out of it. Whereas it's a very similar thing to what works on websites as well. It's getting into people's hopes and dreams and fears and those kinds of things, which must light up the same parts of the brain, the limbic system, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that that's the first port of call, is to get that emotional person-to-person connection before going into the feature list.
Yeah. There's an old-fashioned mnemonic, Mike, which is probably one of the cornerstone marketing methodologies, which is AIDA, right? And I can remember learning about this many, many moons ago. But we're big advocates of AIDA at Sales Geek, and basically what it means is A is for attention,
Mm-hmm.
and you get attention the right way by just making it about them, and creating interest just by asking good questions. And I think that's probably the second thing where we feel a lot of salespeople go wrong. They end up talking, well, they might ask one question, they might listen for a little bit, and then they've got this kind of inattentive blindness where they've got 101 things that they want to be telling them about their business and, and their service. And this is where they go wrong. So yeah, if you follow the AIDA, the interest is all about just creating interest through asking good and better open questions, probing questions that get them on the topic that you want to talk about. Then, of course, you've got great ammunition, and you've probably gone a good way for building a good rapport from the outset. Then you can talk about why your product and services of value, and start building desire. And then, of course, the A is the action. What do you do then? Do you get another meeting? Do you propose a further meeting? Do you take that to the next level, or even close the deal at that point? And so yeah, good old AIDA.
So that's the framework that you teach.
One of the frameworks.
One of the frameworks. Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And so does that fit under the first P, the process?
It probably does. Yeah. So we would look primarily at what an individual does in terms of taking someone through that process, i.e. sales process, but we'd also look at the business in terms of what are the key stages that they look at doing, and then help optimize that by refining those things. A lot of people, in their own process, they may not even have a qualification stage. For example, I think when we've met before, I told you about this example of a business that I met that I was working with, and they would get lots of inquiries. And I used to say, how many proposals do you then send out? How many do you convert from an inquiry to proposal? And they said, about 92%. I said, wow, that's amazing. I can learn from you. How are you doing that? And then I said, well, how many of those do you then actually convert into sales? He said, well, to be honest, Ray, that's why you're here. He said, right. It's less than about 5%. Oh my God, that's shocking. And actually, it didn't take long to ascertain that there was no qualification process in their business at that time. If someone was requesting, free red, white, and blue widgets, they would send a quote or a proposal out for exactly 3 red, white, or blue widgets. But there was no conversation to ask about, timescale, or to find out indeed actually what the real need or challenge was. Maybe the 3 red, white, and blue widgets weren't the right thing for them. They needed bronze, silver, and gold, or whatever. So we use, again, tried and tested methodologies to ensure that salespeople and business owners, or whoever is involved in dealing with customers, to have a proper qualification and understand exactly what they need, and who's got the authority to move forwards, and when it's going to happen, what sort of budget, and all these things that come out.
So it's really delving into what they actually need as a business to help them move forward, rather than just fulfilling a brief.
Exactly.
The brief might not be exactly what they need.
100%. Yeah, and businesses will get along by absolutely fine by, answering people that have said, yeah, here's my inquiry, and they reply and they give them a quote. But it's those that really want to take it up a notch and really accelerate their sales, that do it the right way, that will benefit enormously.
Absolutely. And so I just obviously, as somebody who runs their own business and has to do the sales part of it as well, it's so obvious. The clients who you have a better relationship with are the people who you've done that groundwork with before, to truly understand their business and suggest things that they wouldn't have known they might want or need to help with them down the line, because they may have come for one thing, but that may not be right because of your expertise as the person doing the sale. You can advise them on the right thing. Yeah.
So sales, at the end of the day, it's not one big kind of thing where we go for this huge event of closing like all the high pressure sales and all the stories that we've heard from, I'm old enough to know that in the late 80s that's how a lot of stuff was done. But now it's about modern, smart, ethical communication, methods, and often that means getting off on the right foot by creating great first impressions, and then just asking really good questions actually before any of my people that I work with start talking about the things that they can do to help. Is actually just do the questioning. And I always relate it back, if you go and see your doctor, right, And let's say I used to play rugby. I don't play rugby anymore, but if I go and they go, "Oh, Ray, what have you done again? Another broken ankle." Well, he'd ask me a bunch of questions. What were you doing at the time? What sort of speed did you have, like impact and other things? They wouldn't just say, "Oh, right, what have you done? I've injured myself again. Okay, you need this."
Yes,
and I think, well, actually, you haven't really asked me enough. You sure I need that? You sure I need this? It's like, but those that obviously go, the extra mile and really get into their world and ask enough questions to understand, the world from their perspective, they're the ones that they can then, more likely to see change.
Yeah. And then as a business, you can then offer a better service off the back of that groundwork. And that's obviously
100%.
useful in and of itself.
Yeah. Well, how to match, if you've got lots of different products and services or offerings, you can then obviously tailor that specifically to what that person needs. And I'm sure a lot of people do that anyway, but it's easy sometimes to assume. And that's the other thing that I see. People will make assumptions all day long because they know what the value is of their own products, and they perceive that their customers are going to perceive the value in the same way. And actually, that's another mistake that we make. We assume too much and then, don't ask the questions as a result.
Yeah. So assuming is the mistake. You need to find out and do the groundwork for sure. And so with that, I guess, kind of go towards pipeline and proposition, to go back to the 4 Ps.
Yeah, pretty much so. So we do find companies that have been very successful have built through getting good referrals, or they have a good kind of pipeline of inbound inquiries. But a lot of the time, people will come to us, say, "Can you help us build an outbound strategy? How do we do that?" Some people don't have. I always suggest that people have a top 10 target list always. If you could define your ideal customer profile, your ICP, what would they look like? What sort of age? Whatever that demographic is, and where would you find those people? And if you find those organizations that then suit the type of ideal customer that you want to work with, what are the personas that you want to be, having coffee chats and meaningful conversations with? Are they business owners like yourself? Are they MDs? Are they marketing people? The head of HR, whatever. And then we use various tools to help them on that journey, including things like LinkedIn and the better use of LinkedIn, other than just having it, updated to look more like your CV, which is how we all use LinkedIn, many moons ago.
Yeah. And so it's interesting that you talk about your ideal customer profile, and it's something that a lot of people will have heard and know that they are advised to do that kind of thing. But wonder if you can talk about what the benefits of actually doing that are.
Yeah, huge. So I won't mention any names, but there was a business that I met recently that worked in recruitment, and they'd been extremely successful, but they couldn't help but say that they wanted to kind of achieve the profits that they had been achieving 3-4 years ago. And I said, who do you aim at? And they said, "Oh, everybody, anybody that's looking for a job in Hertfordshire."
Classic,
right? Yeah, it is. And you can see where this is going probably, right? And I said, "Okay, so and what were you doing 3-4 years ago?" "Well, actually, we really specialised in C-suite positions, and of course, they were getting a percentage of higher salaries,
of course,
but they were well known in that area. If you're a CFO in particular, you'd go to that recruitment agency, and they had literally just started to cast that net too widely, which is a lot of mistakes, particularly startups make, is they have a product or a service and they try and make that work for literally everybody, and they try and sell to everybody. And actually, those that have succeeded always have a particular ideal customer profile or a certain niche. And it's better to work in that way rather than to try and appeal to everyone.
So it just helps direct what you're saying basically, and how you market to these people.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it's most businesses, including our very own, right?
Well, I was about to ask, what's yours?
There are competitive pressures, right? And yeah, it's important to know where you can help a particular niche and specialize in that, and it gives you your differentiators and your USPs over competition. So if only for that reason, but there are many more, then
sure.
Yeah.
So it might be interesting. I don't know what you think about this, but I would imagine there could be people listening who would say, "Oh, well, I haven't really got a niche. How do I niche down and find out who my ideal target audience is?" Do you advise around that?
Can do, yeah. Sometimes, it's just about who would you want to sell to. Yeah. Well, I was speaking to a company the other day, and they have an opportunity to expand their business, worldwide. I said, well, what are the countries you actually want to go and visit? Where do you want to say, if you land a big contract, do you want to be working in Australia? Do you want to? Oh yeah, never thought of it like that. I said, the world is your destiny. Yeah. It was a product that could have quite easily launched in the US or in other parts of Europe. So sometimes it means just what's right for you. But yes, of course, if you've got the luxury of doing such things, then that's one thing. But yeah, it's if most people will ask what were who would represent the ideal demographic or the ideal vertical market to sell your product into, where have you been successful in the past? What gave you less headaches? We always talk at Sales Geek when we work with people on their account management, is to look at reward v effort.
Yeah.
If you look at maybe, I don't know, some businesses that have worked with 20, 30, 40 clients over the year, or however many, they would immediately know if I said, right, who are your best customers? Well, they're the ones that give us the maximum amount of business, Ray. And actually they're nice people to deal with. They're low effort or medium low effort.
Oh, they're the dream clients.
Yeah, they're the dream clients, correct. But they'd be in your number one tier. They'd be like your Premier League clients. And then everyone knows, funny enough, the opposite of that. They think of their fives and think, oh my God, like I'd have been better off just sending them 50 quid rather than doing that deal. I've made no margin from it. They were a nightmare to deal with. They were driving my operations team, whatever it is,
It's always easier to find to think of the negative.
And then actually that can help sometimes define who their ideal customer profile is. Okay, fine. You wouldn't necessarily get everybody as ones, but anything that was a 3 or a 2 or moving towards a 1. That could be a good way of doing it. But if there were certain sectors or types of customers that came from those areas where you think, yeah, actually it's hard work, it's high effort, the expectation is different, then it's just another way of channeling in on areas or markets that might be fruitful.
That's great. That makes sense. Yeah. And something that I need to do a bit more of, I think. But
you got too many 5s, have you, Michael?
They're all ones.
Yeah,
all my
ones,
clients
perfect.
are ones.
Good. Yeah, good to know for any of your customers that might be listening. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. And so, just to finish off the 4 Ps.
Yes.
I don't know if we've talked much about people, or we may have done in a roundabout way.
Yeah.
But in terms of the 4 Ps, how do people fit in? Is that more the people in terms of the staff or the people?
It is all about staff. Yeah. So more often than not, the types of business that I work with will have salespeople, but it doesn't necessarily mean that have got sales in their title. I work with lots of companies, and that's been one of the things that we've tried to do as an organisation is to change the way the world perceives sales. It's a kind of our mission statement.
Wow, yeah.
And because sales has become a bit of a dirty word, over the last 10, 20 years, probably because of the high pressure sales tactics that we were all accustomed to, many moons ago. And as a result, we have people hiding behind sales titles, but we should be proud of sales if sales are done in the right way and ethically. So one of the first things that we would do, as well as looking at process, pipeline and proposition, is to look at, the people. And that might mean something simple like running a skills gap analysis that gives us some really good data on, whether they have closing methodologies or whether they use, any particular, sales methodologies, and just understanding, where they lie in terms of whether they need any specific training. But yeah, having people that can, fire on all cylinders is a great thing. But often it might mean that they're just customer-facing staff that have part of their role where they are responsible for sales. So anybody that's touching sales at any point, whether it's meeting customers or greeting customers or sending out proposals or whatever, there are always certain stages within that process that can be improved. So we try and look at that, and it can mean that we're helping surveyors. It could mean that I've helped teams of arborists that go out and meet, they're not salespeople, but they're now creating greater impressions. They're first impressions. They're asking the right questions, and if they do that successfully, it just means that the customers are less likely to go out and get more quotes because you've made them feel really special. They think, actually, I really trust that client. I was going to go out and get another 2 or 3 quotes, but actually, you know what? They've made me feel like they are the right company to deal with, and as long as their price is there or thereabouts, they're going to get my business. So they're already, from just doing that, 50% better off, or more probable to to win that account.
Yeah, I mean, you saying that reminds me of when I was getting some work done to the house, getting a new window replaced,
Okay.
and you get all the quotes. You don't want to pay over the odds. He comes around, tells me, "Oh, the people you've had quote before, have they quoted for this type of whatever it was?"
Yes.
I said, "Well, look, make sure whoever quotes for this type of glass or whatever it was at the time." And it's like he's giving me that bit of information. He's
Okay.
taken the time to educate me on what I
Yes.
need. And, because he's shown that care, um, was much more inclined to go with them. And obviously we did in the end, and probably would have done even if they weren't the cheapest quote, because
It
you can trust that person. They've demonstrated their knowledge and they've
100%.
demonstrated that they care about the end result.
Yeah.
And it sounds very similar to your
Yeah,
arborist
it's
example.
true. Often with some of the sales training that we do, Mike, and to use your case as an example, when people, we all have stuff done at home, right? We get lots of different quotes, but they say that you can make up your mind on somebody within just a very short period of time. In fact, we always use the example of like when you buy a house, it's probably the most expensive thing you ever do, and yet you make your mind up. Do you know in how many seconds, having walked through the front door?
Well, you're going to tell me it's very small.
It's 8 seconds.
8 seconds,
which is
wow.
nuts, isn't it? When you consider it's probably the most expensive thing you're going to do, and that is your limbic system that I referred to earlier, going into overdrive. You walk through that front door and you think, right, wow, I can imagine myself chopping onions in the kitchen or mowing the lawn, or right, that's where my TV's going to go on my media wall in that lounge. But what happens over the course of that day, probably within hours or even that week, is that your limbic system will then start communicating with your prefrontal cortex, and you think, right, I need to make this affordable. You'll ring your bank manager, you'll do everything possible, but the impulse for that purchase decision was made up by your limbic system. And the way we get into people's limbic systems is create great first impressions and make it all about them and ask them questions and show care and attention, which is why, they're more likely to get the work just from that. And these are some of the things that we would, help people with, because a lot of people just, ignore that stuff.
Yeah, well, I guess if you don't know, you don't know. It's interesting, isn't it? Because you're saying you make that decision off the limbic system, and then you kind of post hoc rationalization about why you've decided to go with it, but it was not the logical part of the brain. It was the emotional, immediate reaction, and then after the fact, you've gone, right, actually, I did it because of these features.
That's right. Yeah. Well, actually, then if you can do both, then that's even better, isn't it?
Of course, yeah.
The reason to want to be with them, but actually they've then given you the deal of a century too.
Yeah, the double whammy.
Exactly.
So, I mean, you mentioned there like a lofty goal to change the way the world sees sales, which is an impressive target to reach. So what would be like some common misconceptions that people would have about sales?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, like, most people, if they are on the receiving end of having a call or a meeting with a salesperson, they think, oh my God, I'm going to be sold to. Yeah. And that's kind of, I think, the biggest issue that people have. And on the opposite side of the foot, where I meet, people from all ages that maybe haven't sold before, and before they even make that first call, particularly people that have got, these sales development roles where they are maybe canvassing or doing some telesales, whether that's to get appointments for the field sales team to close or whatever it might be. But they are told that they are selling, and they have that imposter syndrome, many of them, where they think, oh my God, and then, they have to be really resilient because they're literally getting rejected and rejected and rejected. So I think those people that feel that they are selling often feel it's because, but actually if I said to them, well, you're not really selling anything. All you're going to be doing is creating a great first impression, being really cheerful, using your tone of voice in the best possible way to project someone who's really friendly, and actually someone who really cares and is interested, because you'll be asking them lots of open questions about what it is they do and what the challenges are, in the same way my doctor might be asking me questions. And I think, well, they're just trying to help me. That's where the difference, takes place. It's, I think people perceive sales as, I'm going to end up with something that I didn't want or I didn't need. And that's the difference. We shouldn't be selling anything first and foremost, unless somebody has a need or a challenge. And if that then allows you to select the right thing for them, the right product or the right service or the right solution, then sales is a great thing, right? And that's what we try and project.
Absolutely. So it's a more ethical way of selling than
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
I wish everyone would be like that. I mean, of course, there are still those companies that exist, and the Sales Geek mission isn't a cure for everything. But yeah, that's our.
But those companies, I think you can kind of sniff them out a lot more easily than maybe you used to. I don't know if that's.
I think you're right. Yeah,
because you get a feeling like, I know this guy doesn't care about what I want. He's just trying to get his commission or meet his targets or whatever that is. I think you can always tell.
Do you? You're absolutely right, Mike. I think actually those that launch into a particular sales pitch about all the things that they think is great about this product, and again they're making a lot of assumptions. Sometimes you can walk into a store and people say, "Oh yeah, you need that, and this is good," and da da da. I haven't even asked one question. Yeah, it might not have even been for me. It might have been for my son or someone else.
Yeah, and weirdly, it's their most expensive package that you need.
Yeah, funny enough, it often is. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So, well, it's good that you're doing the opposite. So that's good to know. And so maybe this question will be related to that one in a way.
Yeah,
I was going to ask some common mistakes that people often make when it comes to sales.
Yeah. It's funny. Some of the basic things that we see is that I think most people in sales suffer from this inattentive blindness. So what does that mean? It means, well, they're bombarded with thoughts and things that maybe their bosses or whoever have said that they've got to be saying and projecting and presenting on that call. And I think we just lose the ultimate skill to listen. And one of the things that we say to our clients and the people that run our sales training sessions is that there are actually 5 levels, would you believe, of listening. If my wife's listening to this, she'll say, well, I've always said Ray's either listening or he's not listening. How can there be 5? But so the thing that I find most and the biggest issue is that people don't listen long enough to really understand people on an emotive level, or to listen long enough to really understand the world from their perspective. And there's a class of people, they say that 80% of us fall into these first 2 levels of listening, which is either you only listen long enough and we call it the gist, right? You only listen to someone long enough if you kind of are into the same thing that they're talking about, or you've got a kind of common understanding. But the biggest shocker is that most of us fall into this other camp of they suffer from rebut. And rebut are people where they're only listening long enough until there's a gap, right? And we've all got friends. And when I say this, people always smile. Oh, I know someone like that. You can just see them. They're almost itching to tell you their story. And they might say, "Oh, Ray, how was your holiday?" "Oh, yeah, good." And then they go, "Yeah, no, I had a good holiday too." And then they start telling me all about their. Hang on a minute. You asked me, that was my moment, and you've just stolen it.
Yeah.
And salespeople are notorious for this. They'll ask one open question, and then that's it. Or there might even be an open question, but they'll ask a question, and then they get an answer, and then they relate something back to them, or they start talking about their product and service. So it's what my grandma used to say to me, "Ray, that's why you got 2 of these and 1 of these." Pointing at my ears. We need to be better at listening. And of course, it's good to ask lots of open questions, but when we get an answer, dig a bit deeper. Ask another question about the last answer, and listen attentively. And who'd have thought? The first rule in sales is just to actually listen and not talk.
Well, that is interesting because I've always kind of felt that when you have these kickoff meetings or sales meetings with potential clients, I like to make sure they do most of the talking compared to myself. And glad to hear that that's the right way of doing it.
Good for you.
But because I feel like kind of you're going to get the information that way because they're going to need to tell you it, but also I maybe rightly, maybe wrongly, I feel like if they're talking, they're going to maybe feel more comfortable in the situation than being talked at. Like you mentioned, the salespeople, the classic bad example salespeople who go bah, 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 straight away.
Yeah, it absolutely helps build trust and rapport from the outset. If you've got somebody, and it's the same in networking, and I know you and I have spoken about this before, but it's fascinating to see in when you're out networking how many people will come up and they see your badge and then they just start talking at you and explaining how they can help, and before they really know anything about you whatsoever. It's
they've given you the card and they've gone.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, or they give you they give you the spill and then the card and just expect the phone to ring.
Yeah,
sorry,
these networking events don't work.
I can honestly tell those people the card didn't even make it home if they've done that to me.
Yeah. So talking of networking, then that's, I think, an interesting topic, and a lot of people will be going to networking events, or they might be thinking about it. I've obviously met you before at networking events.
Indeed, we did, didn't we? Yeah. That's right.
So what have you got any advice around how to do networking well?
Well, I think networking's great. So I'm big advocate of networking, particularly if you're a local business that relies on local traffic, and if you're selling B2B or even B2C, networking's a good thing. You got to find obviously the right event, and sometimes you got to kiss a few frogs, and it's the same with networking. You can find ones where it's the right type of kind of event where you've got your ideal customer profile in there, as we referred to earlier. But I think again, it's about what it is that you say in that first 20, 30 seconds. If you're just going to go and meet people and try and sell to people, think again. It's about exploring the conversation, giving value to those sessions, and actually just, I always say as a rule, try not to say anything. If people ask you, well, I say, you go first, Mike. You tell me about you. Yeah, how's business with you? And you explain how's business. Right, what's good? What's bad? If I could wave a magic wand right now, what would be the things that we could fix, and just really get into their world?
Yeah, be interested.
Be interested, be curious, and just ask more questions. I think if everybody did that, networking would be fun, and the best networkers do that. And actually, when you do ask them, then they've always got one of two things. They've either got a good why. I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek. He always says start with your why rather than what you do and how you do it. And I think those people that I remember from networking sessions are those that have had a really strong why. Why is it they get out of bed? Why is it that they do what they do? And people also that build stories around their why. And they can give, I've met some amazing business owners who've had very impactful reasons as to why they do what they do. And it really resonates. And they're the ones that I then go home and think, wow, that kind of blew me away. Good for them. Now I can see why they do what they do. And all the others they're just the same. They talk about what and how, and it's too much of that. So that'd be my biggest tips.
That's very interesting, and that's going to give me some food for thought next time I go to a networking event. But staying on networking for a second, let's just assume someone's not been to a networking event before. They know they probably should go, but they're on the shyer side.
Right.
Have you got any tips for like how would they approach someone? Because it can be quite nerve-wracking.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I would say most of the network events that I've been to, and you and I have been to a few, whether you do BNI or if it's a chamber event or business bars or any of these things, lots of good local, networking events that you can go to in your community. The great thing about them is that they've normally always been organised by someone. There's a host. And I would go to the host. They're gonna know who the regular ones and the networkers are within that group. And you can explain, who you're looking for, what the type of business is that, that would help. And so that would be my first protocol is, use the host and maybe do a bit of research in terms of, maybe other businesses that you've seen that have been there before. And find out a little bit more about other people and find some common ground. It's a great way, isn't it? You can go up to someone and say, hey, I notice you also live in St Albans or Welling or Hitchin or whatever, and strike up a conversation. And so it's essentially using similar skills as we would when we talk about making that first introduction, in a sales environment.
I think that's such good advice. I would never thought about asking the host to introduce you to someone, but a lot of them are so willing to do that, and the best ones do it without you asking them as well.
They? Yes, but I've noticed that they do absolutely. Yeah, you can walk into a room and they think, wow, you're new, right? And they go, I think you'd be right for so-and-so. So a lot of them do that. But
don't always do it. But if you ask them, then they always will, because they will know 100%. The people. Yeah, that's such good advice.
And they're keen for you to come back, aren't they, and participate. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, cool. And in terms of one thing we haven't kind of touched on is the final bit of the sale, the closing of the sale. How the hell do you do that?
It's funny, isn't it? So, we talked about simplifying someone's process. I honestly think if you do the first three things correctly, so just to review that, it's like create a great first impression the right way. Don't make it all about you. Ask lots of open questions. So improve your questioning techniques, and then tailor that when you start talking about what it is that you can do to help for the specific challenges or issues, rather than just feature preaching where you say, oh, these are 11 things that we do. Aren't we great? We've done this and we've done that. Stop doing that if you are doing that. Once you get to that point, you're less likely, because you've had a deeper, meaningful conversation, to get objections, and you should form a natural close But I would say closing is not one big event. Yeah, if you can come on a geeky closing clinic and we can give you 6 of the very best closing techniques, which are all very ethical and tried and tested, and some of them they even teach at Harvard Business School. So, but I honestly, to answer your question, the best way is to ask kind of trial close questions. So once you've been talking about your product and service, just say, hey, Mike, what are your thoughts? Yeah. What do you think to the things that we've discussed so far? And you're even going to say, well, yeah, I think they're great, Ray. And in which case I'd say, great. Well, look, should we get you signed up? And that feels really natural. There's no hard pressure. If, of course, you said, well, yeah, some of the things that you mentioned seem appealing, but I've got a few questions about X, Y, and Z, it's then a perfect opportunity to address those things. So I think if people used more trial close questions in the same way, you wouldn't jump into a hot bath without testing the water. Yeah, most people wouldn't. It's the same thing in sales. It's like, once you've had your, conversation, ask them if they've got any further questions. Is there anything specific, that they want to find further things about? What are their thoughts? Where's their head at? Right. And those are more natural ways to get to a close.
Yeah. So it's mainly like having the natural conversations, and it will lead to that natural place where they either you close it or they say thank you, but no thank you.
There will be times, right, where you've got to ask for the business, and this is something that we absolutely need to work on. Is sometimes you can do a great deal. Let's just say you've got their attention the right way. You've asked great questions. You've matched your products and services and tailored it to that person's challenge, and then you got that awful silence, and it's like, okay, what do I do now? No one's ever told me how to close. But you can make an assumption if someone has agreed with you. So great. Well, look, shall we get you started then?
Yeah.
Yeah. When do you want to get started, Mike? Next week or the week after this? Yeah, it's a natural thing. I always say, if you were like buying something in, say John Lewis, for example, and you walk up to the counter with your shirt, that person's going to assume, right? It's a natural thing to say, oh, cash or card.
Sure.
Yeah. They don't expect you're going to just be there for a conversation. You've walked up there with the shirt. So if I've taken you through the process correctly, then it's absolutely fine for me to say, when would you like to get started? It's not a high pressure close. It's not needed, but you've got to get the groundwork and do the things correctly in the first place. But it's not some big event. We talk about closing as being like words in a stick of rock. It literally starts almost, it's continuous. It's through the process. There can be an appropriate moment to say, well, fine, yeah, let's get you started now. If they say, this is all I need, I've been searching around and I found it in what you do, tell me a bit more about it, and then you could close that deal there and then. But yeah, in most cases, it's natural because you've done the groundwork and you've made it about that customer first.
Amazing. Well, there's been so much useful information, and it's been a great conversation all the way through, just like one of your sales processes, no doubt.
It's been a pleasure.
But if people want to use your services or find you to ask you some questions, where can they find you?
Yeah, so they can find me, Ray Wheeler, Sales Geek, through LinkedIn. Or they can find our website, just Google Sales Geek. There's about 30 of us geeks up and down the country. I'm the business owner for Sales Geek in Central and North Hearts. And love to have a conversation if anyone's curious as a result of your amazing podcast. They'd be happy to answer any questions and help anyone, even if it's just meeting up for a coffee and pointing them in the right direction. Always happy to do that.
Brilliant. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike.